Welcome to Leading from Being with hosts Marti Spiegelman and Todd Hoskins. Together they weave original human wisdom, play with language, and explore leadership and consciousness to help you create more thriving people, teams, organizations, and communities. Today they continue their series on landscapes, exploring ecotones, transitional areas in nature where communities, ecosystems, or biomes meet and integrate. Stick around for takeaways and Marti's essay, The Infinite Arrival. Get show notes and much more at leadingfrombeing.com.
Hello and welcome to Leading from Being. My name's Marti Spiegelman, and I'm here with my friend and colleague, Todd Hoskins. Hey, Todd, good to be with you.
Hey, Marti, and hello to all of our listeners.
Today, we're going to continue our series on landscape. So, Todd, will you get us started?
Absolutely. For those of you who have been with us through this series, we've been exploring something that keeps revealing itself as deeper than expected. The idea that landscapes are living territory, they have something to communicate when we're willing to participate in the exchange. We've explored what it means to listen to the speech of the land, the rivers, the ice, the stars, the cycles of a place speaking in ways that humans once knew how to hear. We've explored wildness as the creative, unpredictable way that life actually moves. And most recently, we explored wayfinding, finding our way across territory we've never encountered before by being present enough to be in dialogue with the landscape itself. Each of these conversations has brought us closer to something we keep circling. This relationship between a human being and the living world is participatory. We are in the landscape is in us. And what emerges from that participation is something that neither we nor the land could create in isolation. Which brings us to today's topic, ecotones. Eco comes from the Greek oikos, household, the living relationships of a place, just like economy and ecology. And tone comes from the Greek tonos, meaning tension, which itself comes from tenein, to stretch. It's the same root that gives us the tension in a musical string. I want to stay with this stretching for a moment because there's more here than metaphor. A string that isn't stretched produces no sound. It is held in tension for vibration to become possible, and it's the vibration that makes the music. Tone is what emerges from stretching. The same root gives us tonic. In music, the home note, the note of rest and return. But tonic only becomes home because of all the tension around it. A tonic in isolation is just a pitch. It becomes home in relationship to the stretching, the movement away and back, the pull of other notes, creating a field of tonality. Home is a felt quality that arises from the interactions of the whole. And beyond music, tonic, something that restores vitality. A tonic is what brings you back to life. We recognize the word because we recognize the experience, something that revitalizes, that returns us to a quality of aliveness we didn't realize we'd lost. That too comes from this root of stretching, of tension, vitality arising from the stretch. Ecotone, the living relationships of a place stretched into interaction. Something happening, different ways of being alive in exchange with one another, producing vibration, producing what's new that could not arise in the absence of tension. In ecology, ecotones are the zones where different environments interact, where forest meets grassland, where river meets the sea, where the intertidal zone rises and falls between land and water, where the floodplain floods and drains and floods again. You might expect that these edges would be diminished, zones where neither adjacent environment can fully establish itself, where different forms of life are competing for the same ground. But that's not what ecologists find. Biodiversity concentrates at edges Life proliferates where different environments interact. They call this the edge effect. And the reasons go deeper than simple access to resources from both sides. Ecotones generate characteristics that don't exist in either adjacent environment. For example, the mangrove, the zone where terrestrial and marine ecologies interpenetrate. The mangrove doesn't combine features of land and sea, it contains its own uniqueness. A nursery for ocean fish, a buffer against storm surge, a carbon sink of extraordinary efficiency, a water filter that protects coral reefs. The mangrove is an interaction so rich and sustained that it becomes its own living world. The estuary, the alpine tree line, the hedgerow between fields that farmers once understood as essential and modern agriculture has forgotten. These are zones of active creation, zones of the in-between, interactions producing what sameness could never generate. I would like to share a story. In the mid-90s, I was invited to a rave in a state forest. We drove through a rural area in the dark until we found a guard at the entrance, checking credentials and waving us into the forest. A parking attendant directed us to a spot beneath towering pines. We stepped out of the car and followed the music. A clearing opened up, a stage larger than expected, a funk band playing from Baltimore. People dancing, laughing, clustered in groups. I remember thinking, what is this? A couple hours later, I discovered another smaller stage, a good 15-minute hike deeper into the woods. I tried to imagine how permission had been granted for this, if permission had been granted at all. I am someone who likes to go to bed early and wake up early, and yet I stayed up dancing until the sun rose. We went and got pancakes afterwards and talked about the people we'd encountered. It was magic in the middle of the woods. What I remembered most all these years later is that the forest was a part of it. I can't remember the music or faces, but I remember the feeling of being in that forest surrounded by music. The darkness between the clearings, sound moving differently through the canopy. Something was happening between people and that place that would not have happened in a warehouse or a concert hall. A quality of aliveness was being generated that none of the ingredients could have produced on their own. The interaction itself had come alive. That's what I mean by ecotone. Yes, it's a place, a clearing in a state forest, a mangrove coastline, a hedgerow, and it's also what's happening in that place. The interaction becoming so alive, it generates its own world. It could be tempting to take this concept and abstract it, to say ecotones teach us that when different things meet, good things happen. Or we take one environment here, another environment there, and it makes a third environment. That's polarity thinking. It isolates two sides and focuses on managing the relationship between them. What this series has been exploring lives somewhere else, in the interaction itself, in what is being generated by the exchange. And this has something to say to us as lived experience. We've been exploring throughout this series how the outer landscape and the inner landscape participate in each other. If life concentrates at these so-called edges, if the most generative zones in the living world are places of sustained interaction between aliveness, what does that suggest about our own experience? Where has familiar ground given way and something is making itself felt in the stretching? Many of us want to resolve this tension as quickly as possible. Pick a side, make a decision, find solid ground. And the word resolve is interesting here too. It comes from a Latin root, resolvere, meaning to loosen, to release, to undo. The original impulse of resolving was an opening, a dissolving what has been held tight. By the 1520s, the meaning had compressed into something almost opposite, to decide, to fix upon a course, to make firm. This is a pattern that occurs across the evolution of language. I discovered recently the word belief. In its Germanic roots, it meant to hold dear, to esteem, to care for. And around the same time as the meaning of resolve shifted, the meaning of belief became compressed into mental conviction about whether a proposition is true. We lost language and we lost our aliveness. Both words moved from the body to the mind, from an experience to an opinion, from something alive to something fixed. So when we say we want to resolve the tension, what if we return to the older meaning? What if resolving didn't mean ending tension, but rather a phase of loosening in order to stretch again? What if the stretching is where the music is? What if the tonic is not an idea, substance, place, or person, but the interactions themselves? Marti, I'm curious where this is landing for you and where you'd like to take us.
Oh, Todd is landing in the center of my heart. It's really amazing. One of the things that I was thinking about even before hearing you today in this beautiful piece, I was thinking about the indigenous term border work. And in indigenous cultures, this is their understanding of what you've taught us is called edges, where two different environments meet, or maybe where two different people meet. And the indigenous idea is that those borders need work. They need our attention. And the indigenous understanding is you work the borders so there is exchange. And so there is something life positive and different that gets created in that exchange. So both regions benefit as well as the joining benefits. And this is just how consciousness works. You've heard me talk about this principle Yanantin, which basically means to bring complementarities together. But it doesn't mean just sticking black and white together and you're all done. It means understanding that two different things come together if they're quote unquote conscious. In the coming together, they generate a third new thing that is beneficial to everything. It's beneficial to the component parts. It's beneficial to the new thing created. This business of bringing things together, this is what an ecotone actually is. This is how nature, how consciousness keeps itself going and adds to the wisdom of the world. A lot of people complain about, oh, it's too complex. Oh, it's too much information. Oh, it's too much information because we don't know how to bring two things together to make a third new thing that feeds everything. And the ecotone, I'm so glad that you came upon this concept for us to talk about. The ecotone, it's a metaphor, a living metaphor for us in the world today. We need to do this with cultures. We need to do this with neighborhoods. We need to do this with different approaches to the sacred. We sometimes call that religion, but there are many approaches to the sacred. We need to do this so we understand what is other than us, and we don't have to kill off what is other than us. So that's sort of the big umbrella that landed on me. But the big thing I think that really strikes me is how nature strives to connect not just one thing to one thing, but one system to another system, and then those joined systems to other joined systems. And this is how life propagates itself. This is how consciousness evolves. And you think about the extraordinary dissonance and separation that's developed in the world today. We're living in a way where we can't even reach this wisdom.
This is the first time I've heard you talk about border work, Marti. It makes me think of permeable membranes.
Right.
The body is full of permeable membranes, so there is containment, but there's also exchange. Our cell walls, which we call them walls, are not usually walls. They're usually more permeable membranes. Mm-hmm. And I think even when we get into ecology, we often want to strictly define the borders of an environment and then strictly define the borders of an ecotone. When all of this is living and dynamic and shifting, we need to acknowledge the living nature of these borders and not seeing them as big towering walls.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And if we go back to the body as a dimensional metaphor, within the so-called cell walls, there are channels, literally channels. There are calcium channels, potassium channels. There are structures through which exchange is made. And every exchange, whether we're talking about the body or an ecotone in nature or a cultural border, every exchange is done for the purpose of not just supporting life as it is, but growing and evolving life, being sure that ongoing life is supported. And we're so accustomed to holding things steady. We don't want change. And the worse the world gets, the more we cling to what used to feel good. So we're setting ourselves up, us humans, we're setting ourselves up psychologically to not be able to understand this principle of the ecotone.
I want to talk about stretching a little bit because in my etymological journey here, I hesitated to actually bring this in because we already have this word tone with so much richness. And the reason I hesitated to bring it in is because we automatically think of stretch as effort filled. So I go to stretch goals. What are your goals? And then what are your goals that are a little bit further? And how do you stretch into that? And our culture sees stretching as an exertion of the will.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than what I felt in the essence of tone and tanane, life does stretch us. We stretch with life. And we contract, and then we stretch again, and we contract, and we stretch again. And for many people who are grown up in the culture we do, we want to resist that cycle of stretching. We want to maintain our resolute firmness, the flexibility that requires just to be able to stretch. For the string to stretch on the instrument, it needs form. But it needs to be able to shift form. And in that shifting of form, it creates something beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking about this too, in a slightly different way. I was looking up some stuff about ecotones, and I found, in honor of you, canopy gaps. I was reading about canopy gaps in the forest and how gaps in the canopy of a forest get created. Maybe a tree falls, a storm comes. And what happens is the light gets into the gap created by something falling. And where light strikes the forest floor, you start to see an ecotone develop. There's new light and there's space, and new things start to grow. And everything stretches, if we want to use that word, everything stretches, reaches for the light. And when light hits the ground and there isn't anything there, life appears. Life meets that light. And so I think this stretching, we're so accustomed in Western culture to hold ourselves in. Everybody's in aches and pains because nobody knows how to move anymore, right? And light is something that life reaches for. Light becomes life. They say in the Andes that this world that we live in is what light strikes. And you get light on a forest floor that hasn't seen direct sunlight for a long time. You get new life there. And so I hear the word stretching, and I respond by a sense of reaching and reaching for possibility. And, I always also think of Angeles Arian, who always used to teach people about the four-chambered heart. And she would say that your arms and hands are part of heart. And when you reach for what you want, you're reaching with your heart. And this is what life does. We reach to the light. We reach into open spaces. We reach into that space that's going to become an ecotone. That's what conscious life is. And so I think what we're talking about is, it's like a crust that's gradually developed over the Western psyche. And we've developed this very contained idea of what it is to be alive and what's okay and what's not okay. And we don't even realize how much we've limited ourselves. But everything is life itself. I think you're right, is in this stretching, this releasing and contracting, releasing and contracting. That's our basic cranial rhythm. Everything in life, the earth has that pulsing. It's that wavelength of life that we need to bring alive in ourselves again. And if we reach out into life, we don't know what's going to happen, but nothing will happen until we do that reaching. So I think this is very, very important for people to hear.
I knew this was going to bring about a conversation on complementarities. The new is created, that third thing, the new is created.
Mhm.
And for that new to be created, it requires some encounter of difference.
Mm-hmm.
A mark of modern Western culture is the drive for sameness, sanitized, predictable, creates a certain form of rigidity, and the sameness tends to create just more sameness.
It does.
Which I think is a reason that art is so necessary in the times that we live in, because whatever the art form is, it's a revolt against sameness. It's a showing what could be. And I mean, obviously I wrote about this rave, so I've been thinking about music, and I've been thinking about this controversy with AI generated music, and that AI knows kind of the certain forms, tonal qualities, chord structures, progressions, all of the things that humans tend to like. But in that, there's sameness.
Yeah.
And I'm going to predict that AI music might become somewhat popular, but it'll not fully satisfy us in the way that music that is human created directly gives us a feeling of being alive. Just like I had in that forest, the many live music shows, and when Pia is gone here in the house and I turn up the volume on the speakers and dance a little bit, and then the dogs get really excited because dogs love that dancing energy. They don't know how to dance normally, but they want to participate in that.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know if I can imagine that true dancing to music that is carefully considered and in that realm of sameness versus the patterns that I've never heard before and the sounds that blend in such a way that I can feel. It's not just feeling music, it's feeling aliveness, feeling the delight, especially the second time you hear a song, feeling the delight of, I'm so surprised by what happens next. And then I go back and listen to it again and I feel the layers in that, and I get new surprises in listening to that song.
Exactly. Yes.
That
exactly.
is aliveness.
Yeah, aliveness. But what you're talking about, that encountering the never before seen or felt or heard, that's consciousness evolving. That thing of like feeling alive, that's life force on the move. And to create something, you've got to bring different things together to make a third new thing. That's how it's always worked, and I think it's always going to work that way. And I think the problem with all of our artificial stuff, we humans feel so clever, but the artificial stuff is just copying what we put into it. And there is no life force in there. There actually is no consciousness in there. And so we talk about ecotones, this thing in nature. I hope all of our listeners will just go Google this and find some pictures of ecotones in nature and just feel what is happening. Can you feel the life force of really different regions suddenly realizing there's a gap between them? They don't retreat, they move forward. And those different life forms and things that have lived with different hydrologic systems and different geologies and everything, they move to meet one another and see what they can do. And they don't sit down and say, oh, let's do a feasibility study. Oh, I don't think we can fill this gap. Let's move on. They don't do that, right? They just move in because life says so, because consciousness says so. And I just keep feeling the world today, and we have become so emotionally armored that we can't reach out. That arm and hand that is part of our heart doesn't reach out anymore. Nature is going on and doing its thing, but we humans are losing our grip because we have lost so much consciousness that we don't know how to be the conduit for border work, for ecotone existence. And this, I couldn't think of a more important topic right now, actually. And all of these ways that you've brought forward, especially music, I think that there's nothing more glorious than a human making music. And in fact, once we asked in the Andes, we asked what they thought of humans and why we developed the capacity for language. And one of the answers was we have language so we can share our dreams. But I also think in terms of biology, I once heard a developmental biologist talk about this, and he said that our chimpanzee and gorilla cousins didn't develop the length of neck nor the shape of nasal passages and nasal pharynx in order to make the sounds that a human can make. Because we not only can recite poems to one another, we can sing. We can sing the blues, we can sing opera, we can sing, whatever. We can sing to one another, and we can make music. We have an ear for tone that I think maybe no other creature quite has, not the way we have it. And we don't have these talents for no reason. Everything that we've been given is for a purpose, for expression, for creativity. And I think through music, this is just one way for our listeners, through music, just put some music on, some real music created by humans, and see what happens to how you feel in the world, how you feel in yourself, and how you feel in the world. Because in a sense, I think within a human structure, within us, there's an ecotone. Because there's us, and then there's the world. And within us, we can develop new knowledge and new sensibilities and new dimensions of understanding. The whole principle of ecotones in nature is creation is happening. New things are being created. And there's a principle in the Andean understanding of consciousness, and it's called the principle of replication, as opposed to duplication. And the metaphor is a corn kernel. So if you take a corn kernel and you plant it, you don't get just one more corn kernel. You get the essence of that kernel, which is the entire stalk, and 5 or 6 whole new ears of corn that are each filled with more corn kernels. You get the essence replicated and amplified. And the ecotone is that. It's nature coming together, and the essence of each thing that meets a new thing from the other region, the essences join to replicate. And they replicate new things, but there's a continuity in there. There's nothing is really lost. There's only addition. And I think one of the things that plagues modern people is, without being born into cultures that recognize our identity and our value from birth, we're constantly looking for validation. Am I okay? Am I good enough to be here and not there? Do I have to compete with this person or that person? We don't have a sense that we're okay. And so we don't want to join with anybody else because we might get lost in the joining. We don't understand our essence is what gets replicated when we move out in the world. And for each person, that essence is unique. And if you know you're unique, you will move out in the world knowing your essence is never lost, and you will create with other people knowing your essence is additive. Think about all the things we've discovered through tracking where humans began, and they went from Africa to here and from Asia to there. And I mean, we go places. That's our thing. I think we talked about this in Wayfinders. It's our nature to get up and reach out and go someplace we've never been before. And this reaching, it's in our nature. And if we don't do that, I mean, just think about everyday circumstances where you don't feel you can be yourself. How stressful is that? Uh, so I think anything that opens us up to that, there's a natural desire to reach out. It's like you're describing that rave when we get relaxed and we call it partying, but we're dancing and singing and expressing. Uh, you find yourself just wanting to reach out. You want to connect. That's our nature. That's our essence. And that's the thing we want to replicate.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other thing you brought forward that I think is so important is this business of how especially in English, over time, the meaning of words gets flipped to the opposite.
Isn't that fascinating?
It's really fascinating. And my favorite example is the word myth, which comes from mythos, which used to be the true story of a people, and now it's something false. And you found some more fabulous examples. I think it's really important to study that because it's how we use language is an outcome of our experience. And so it means that we have, as Western culture has progressed, we have gone from reaching out to isolating. We have gone from opening up to closing down and fixity. And that's in that language. We've gone from understanding what is true to claiming everything is fake news. And so what we say needs to come from the heart of who we are, and that heart has to reach out into the world. So we need to become the masters of the ecotone again. We need to reach out to the other and see what happens. We need to walk into the unknown, have some fun.
Definitely. I want to talk about ecotones as a model for partnerships in the organizational world.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
A lot of organizations and the way that they are structured, they are essentially creating walls around this is the territory we exist in, this is what we do. This is the value we bring. We protect that territory. We may try to expand that territory, but it's wall-based.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot more discussion these days about public-private partnerships, about the environment that we're in right now, that we can't try to do things alone, that we need to partner. But I feel like the principle of ecotone encourages us to think more wildly about what partnerships might create something new, something that is outside of the industry, the comfort zone, definitely outside of expectations, and how much fun it would be to have organizational leaders across sectors, across sizes and types of organizations, across borders, who are meeting to ask the question, who are you? What are you about? And what could we possibly do together? Or maybe even who might we become if we are exploring a path together?
Yeah, exactly. It's an understanding. It's really cellular if we remember ourselves that coming together to create the never before imagined is what we're all about. It's what we're here for, and we're happier when we're doing that. And I think this is a brilliant message to bring to organizations and to people in different professions who could come together and do fantastic things that would be great for the world and great for them as well. I think it's difficult, though. We just touched on this a minute ago. It's difficult because a lot of people are still caught in that drive to establish their identity and their authority. And joining with someone else, there's this, oh my God, are they going to take my stuff? Are they going to copy me? Am I going to be lost in this? We don't acknowledge one another deeply enough and clearly enough that people are confident in their identities, that people are confident in their essence, as we were just talking about. And so I think this healing of the of the identity of the individual in Western culture that really needs to occur. We need to put some attention to that so people are more confident and more grounded and more willing to reach out and do some good border work, some ecotone work.
Beautiful. I am thinking about participation as healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as we stretch or reach out, who we reach out to, that we don't need to think about we are healers or we are here to do healing work, that it is in the invitation to participation that healing begins. And I feel like right now we need healing all over the place. We have relationships that are isolated, severed, and we are not going to thrive as a species if we are not involved in this participative work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And, healing, I think you're right. Many people hear the word and they go, oh, it's sort of medical and fixing and stuff. But in the Andean traditions, the definition of the healed state, they say your healed state is dependent upon your connectivity into the world. So our healed state and our connections, our healed state and our ecotone work, they're two sides of one coin. If we're connected, we're healthy. So you could have a broken leg and still be in your healed state because you stay connected to all the people that you know and the people who love you and are supporting you, not just your medical team. And so this business of healing, it means connecting. And if we're going to thrive and express and give our gift into the world, we're using those same connections into the world that support our healed state. So the healed state is an expressive state. It's a connected state. And you're right that the healing is the connecting. The connecting is the healing. It's not, I'll do something and now you're healed and now you can connect. It's not sequential. It is the participation, as you said. That is the healing.
Earlier, Marti, you brought up the ecotones within ourselves. I wonder if you could explore that more.
Well, yeah, I was just imagining us, the human organism, which is so extraordinary to begin with. We're conduits, right? We're here to create. We're here to connect. We're here to steward the evolution of consciousness and so on. And we've got this very special place in the biology and the consciousness of the planet. Our job really is to steward creativity. And creativity, if we're going to be really effectively creative, it means we need to master this principle of complementarities. We know we need to master bringing just the right things together in just the right proportion so something new and life affirming, life positive, life nurturing gets created. And my best example of this is water. Think about what water is. It starts as gas ions, and you have to have the right proportion of hydrogen and oxygen ions, and you bring them together and you get a liquid that supports all of life. And so in our consciousness, our capacity to be aware of the world, to learn from the world through our sensing systems, we are like border agents, if you will. We ought to be the creatures on the planet who can hear from nature and hear from collectives of humans what is kind of arriving, what's merging together, what would be great to bring together. We could be stewards of this ecotone work, stewards of this border work, and I really do think that's part of our job. So the ecotone within us is like our consciousness and our imagination. We can pick up what we could bring together now to make everything better in the regions where we have influence.
I hope the listeners can kind of feel that. And we've kind of struggled at times with this. We used to have a segment called, what did we call it? Something The Edge.
Yeah, something the edge. Maybe it was just the edge, at the edge.
From the edge, from the edge. We
Yeah,
called it
from the edge.
from the edge.
Yeah.
And we have this bias towards, it's a geographic bias in some way that there's a center and then there's an edge.
Mm.
And we need to stay centered and go to the edge. And I have some issues with that
Yeah.
where sometimes the edge is the center.
Right.
And when we try to map things too rigidly, we miss the dynamic nature here. And so as that relates to the ecotones within ourselves, I hope the listeners can just feel the nether parts of themselves. I did not want to say the edge of themselves. That creativity that you know is there, that you know you have access to, that buoyancy, that determination, that what comes naturally without you having to work so hard, that you have access to. That I think when I am now imagining this ecotone within myself, I'm imagining like I have all of this beautiful giant library. I love books, so this beautiful giant library, and those books are not full of knowledge. Those books are full of options and possibilities and capacities. And my ecotone is not about reaching for the knowledge that I forgot. It's about reaching for or stretching to the knowing and the capacity that are together there.
First of all, as creative creatures, when we have a creative impulse, what if we feel into that as ecotone work? If I want to create a new thing in the world, maybe a new thing in the field of consciousness, a new way of working with the principles, is that not ecotone work? I'm one region, and my potential students or mentees are another region, and in the middle ground, I'm creating something new. And, I'm saying this because I talk to so many people who have really brilliant ideas for their work, and they want to create this kind of training or that kind of program, and they hesitate. And I'm saying, no, don't hesitate, because your new thing is essentially, it's an ecotone, because we learn from people around us, and we pick up that knowledge, and we know what we know, and we weave those things together, and there's a whole new region in the middle where your new thing comes to life, and you and your clients come into it, and everybody benefits. I mean, that's a successful business right there. That's a whole new definition of a business, is an ecotone. Yeah. And the other thing that struck me about ecotones within ourselves, think about when we feel really good about ourselves, and then think about something happens and you feel really bad about yourself. What about creating an ecotone between the parts of yourself you don't like and the parts of yourself that you do like? Because the parts that you don't like have a tremendous amount of wisdom. They know the challenges that you've lived through. They know how you survived, what you carry. And the parts of yourself that you do like, they're the parts that have grown beyond those challenges. But in most people, most of us, right, there's a gap in there. And this is what I try to do in my life, is bring the dark and the light together inside me to learn more, to create new ways of being me. And that might be a way that we can create for ourselves that authority and authenticity that we're all seeking. So we don't have to get validated by externals, but we find ourselves within ourselves in that way.
That is brilliant, Marti. And I think the perfect launch pad into potentialities, which is your turn.
Great. Thank you, Todd. Yes, my turn. I've titled this little piece, Infinite Arrivals.
Potentialities. potentialities.
So, a little preface here. When I sat down to gather my thoughts for today's potentiality segment, I found myself rather blank-minded for a bit, which always unnerves me. And I realized, I said this to you earlier, Todd, the subject of ecotones was so amazing, and it just filled my awareness and captured my imagination. And everything I started to draft for potentialities, I realized that, oh no, that's for our main conversation. And I probably started this little segment, I probably started over half a dozen times. And every time I'd get empty-headed again and think, oh God, oh no, what am I going to do? And then I remembered something. I remembered actually 3 things that I always tell my own students. First of all, I remembered that nothing is always something. And the corollary to that is that that kind of something is always really valuable. So that's first. Second, intelligence exists in spaciousness. And the corollary to that is that any degree of pushing or efforting closes down that space. And then the third thing here is that in graphic design, white space, that's the empty parts of a page, white space carries vital information. And the corollary is if you ignore the empty space, you won't know what's actually being communicated. So I remembered these things, and then I realized that somewhere in my empty head, there was vital information, which I had best remain open to because something was being communicated to me. So in other words, I realized there was a high value potentiality arriving in my awareness. And that's the seed of what I'm going to share with you. So we usually think of potentialities as being far away from us. They're not yet visible. They're not on the move. We don't know what it is. And we think of ourselves as being here and the potential for something new as being there. And we generally don't tune in to the energy that is always moving in the space between ourselves and a potentiality. And that means that we generally miss the information that energy always carries. So to master our wondrous human capacity to manifest the never before imagined, we first have to understand that potentialities are arrivals. You don't have to go get them. They're arrivals. Energy and information from distant points in the conscious universe arrive in our awareness, each one emerging out of an infinite field of possibilities. In fact, this is what we're here for. We were just talking about this. And Don Eduardo Calderon used to say in the Andes, he'd say that we're here to be the conduits for all the beauty and vibrant energies the universe has to offer. That's how he described potentialities. Now, we can tune ourselves to receive these arrivals, and we can tune ourselves and learn to steward their expression, but we cannot predefine or control them. And you can feel the problem arriving. This is a problem in the world we have now because our world is shaped by a belief that we humans are in control and that we can define things before we experience them and that we have the last word in all conversations. Now, we kind of intellectually know none of that's true, but we're not acting as though we understand that. So we have a problem because we're basically control freaks. Another challenge we face is that not only are potentialities delivered to us, and we can't control their arrival, they're delivered to us, they emerge from one of an infinite number of coordinates in the conscious universe. So I want you to remember the word coordinates. An infinite number of coordinates. Infinite means beyond measure, without end, not bound by space or time. And by its nature, what is infinite defies definition. Beyond measure, without end, not bound by space or time. Don Manuel Quispe used to say he didn't know what infinity was, but he was quite sure it's always good to invite it in. And we need to adopt that. All right. But in the Western way, when we sense a potentiality, the first thing we do is we say, well, how do I make this happen? And of course, that leads us to doing stuff. And we ask, what do I do now? What are the best strategies and tactics and goals to get me from here to there? And we become so engrossed in getting there that we place ourselves at risk of passing right by the potentiality we're seeking. It's like the proverbial ships in the night. The potentiality is arriving, and we're dashing out the door, running in the opposite direction. Not only that, we're speeding up. We're so certain that mythical land we call there is the place our potentiality will manifest that we rush to get there as quickly as possible. And we just don't realize how unhelpful this behavior is. The mindset of getting there fast, you can hear this, getting there fast, binds us within space and time. But a potentiality, because it's infinite, is not bound in this way. So to even recognize the arrival of a potentiality, and I hope you're hearing this, by this, an arrival of a potentiality is a download. It's a, oh my God, I could do this. That would be so great, right? To recognize the arrival of a potentiality, we have to unhook from defined, measured space and time. To receive a potentiality in our awareness, actually accept it, and be willing to take action on it, requires that we be spacious, that we pause, not in blankness, but pause in full awareness, participating with our awareness, listening, receiving, yeah? The arrival of a potentiality demands that we drop any idea of getting there, wherever there is, or anywhere else, and instead acknowledge who we are, where we are. We have to allow the experience of a seemingly empty moment to become a moment of full knowing the details of the download we're being gifted, realizing in that moment that the so-called next steps have also been delivered into our awareness along with a master plan for whatever it is we've been chosen to create. I mean, just take a minute. Where do you think your best ideas have come from? They don't come from your ego. I'm always telling my people, everything inside you came from outside you, right? Your best ideas began as potentialities in the limitless conscious universe, and they were delivered into your awareness because you were the best conduit for their manifestation in the moment. Okay, so now this brings us to another challenge. I'm hearing the elders say it's hard to be human. Okay, this challenge is the challenge of knowing yourself, or as the elders sometimes say, knowing your own coordinate. An arriving potentiality demands that we know who we are by knowing our coordinate in the conscious universe. The delivery of a creative potentiality into our awareness is an act of love and power by the universe on behalf of everything in the universe, including you. And when the master plan and momentum for creating something new arrives, we cannot afford to waste a moment doubting ourselves. Now, we have this culturally imprinted fear of failure. It's the other side of the coin that we call success. And this imprint can turn the sudden awareness of something never before imagined into a terrifying event, even for the best of us. Think of a moment you've had a great idea and all of a sudden no, I can't do that, right? And when that happens to us, instead of staying spacious so the intelligence of that potentiality can emerge and guide us, our response is often to fill the space between our ears, with an overload of strategies and tactics and action plans and a grid of coordinates that have nothing to do with the fierce power of a real potentiality. We end up relying on a grid of old coordinates that rips us out of the coordinate of our true self. Now, we love these strategies and tactics because they supply a map of familiar instructions for reaching familiar endpoints, getting from here to there. And these well-known methodologies seem to give us courage, and they help us believe we can proceed without fear of failure. We may think we'll be venturing onto new ground, going for the gold with our new ideas, but inadvertently we place ourselves and our potentiality in a matrix of old rules that never lets us leave the realm of the already known. Our old ways of creating are based in measuring and controlling, but a potentiality is infinite and therefore immeasurable. You have to let it come through. Our old ways of creating are trapped within space and time, but a potentiality has come from beyond space and time, bringing to us the possibility of reaching new dimensions if only we can break free of familiar coordinates. If only we can overcome our fear of falling short of our predetermined measures and goals. Yoruban writer and philosopher Bayo Akomolafe has a suggestion. To truly live in that rich spaciousness where intelligence exists and potentialities can be manifested, what if we need to fall? What if, in his words, falling might very well be flying without the tyranny of coordinates? Now, what does a tyranny of known coordinates mean? It means that for everything new you encounter, you have an irreversible impulse to anchor it to something you already know. It means when you're challenged to absorb something never before known, you can't admit you didn't know it. Admitting you didn't know would mean failing. It would mean falling. Whereas realizing new knowledge, discovering new coordinates of the possible, meeting and absorbing the never before imagined, would carry you into new domains where potentialities are always on the move toward manifestation. This is flying without the tyranny of coordinates. In the Andean traditions, as in many other sacred lineages, the capacity to fly was understood to be one of the highest states of consciousness a human could attain. Initiated masters were taught to fly at Machu Picchu. And there was an extraordinary lineage of flying shamans, the Pawakuna, in the Nazca region of Peru. And these are just two examples of many. The art of flying is based in the ability to unhook our human awareness from consensual reality and instead, as the Yaqui masters put it, hook into infinity. Now, if we think back on the magic of an ecotone for a moment, feel the wonder of the new life forms and new interrelationships that emerge in an ecotone. That new growth does not subscribe to what has gone before. Instead, it takes advantage of the infinite possibilities and resources available in the moment, every new life form contributing its power and wisdom to the system as a whole. This is what it means to be hooked into infinity. It does not mean you are without coordinates. Even a potentiality has a coordinate in the universe and in the imagination. It just means you're not allowing yourself to be claimed by the coordinates of your past or of consensual reality around you. You're allowing yourself to be the coordinate through which potentialities manifest, and then, as they do, spark the next generation of potentialities on, all of them, infinite arrivals. So I'll leave you with this to feel into, sense into. Perhaps you are the very conduit for the next infinite arrival the world needs now.
Wow, Marti. That took me someplace and I'm just now arriving. I hope to arrive again and again and again.
It was an unfolding experience.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe that will feed us for months. Thank you very much, Todd. That's great. So Todd, I think it's time for takeaways. What do you have for our takeaway today?
Takeaways.
Well, I have a felt sense of the magnificence of ecotones for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think in different dimensions, I feel that just listening to your potentialities piece, the spaciousness, there was an available download to that entire potentialities piece. There's so much wisdom embedded in it, and I think I will walk away with it for now before I listen to it again. I will walk away with the the ease of spaciousness when I'm not trying to think about space or the lack thereof.
Mm.
So it felt like an invitation into spaciousness where I could just float with your words. Hey, I was flying. I was floating
Mm.
with your words.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
And you have a takeaway too for us?
I feel like I have 100. I think that I am still mesmerized by the existence of ecotones and the intelligence of the conscious universe and nature around us that always reaches for connection. And my prayer is that every human on the planet wakes that up inside themselves and we reach for connection again. And the other thing that really caught my attention in your intro was when you were speaking of vibrations and the reaching, the pulsing outward and pulsing inward, that is the energy that does connect us, that we need to really be willing to experience our own vibration as well as others' vibrations and find where resonance is in the world. And I think an ecotone is a region of massive new resonances and acceptance, and that I'm just filled with that right now. It's absolutely beautiful.
Well, thank you, Marti. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today at Leading from Being. We look forward to hearing from you soon, and please step outside.
Absolutely. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Leading from Being. You can learn more at leadingfrombeing.com, including contact information for Marti and Todd. Our theme song is courtesy of Cloud Cult.